Alright, so we finished up Dervish last night. It's now one day later, and we're gonna go talk about Advanced Path Elementalist. So the requirement is meta summoning, however, which is an interesting meta magic skill. However, the hidden cost of that, is, just like Chronomancer, is again wizardry. This is a wizardry path, as it has to do with the elemental sphere. Uh, And to truly call one an elementalist requires not only a mastery of the elements, but an understanding as well. So elementalist is a element based. They care very much about the four base elements that are in the game: fire, ice, lightning, and earth. And they get to do stuff based around that. And particularly, they get to control elementals and they get to summon elementals. The summoning part, when we get to it, I'll talk about it. It's not the best part of the pathway, but there's a reason to play this pathway even if you aren't summoning elementals. So that's cool. Alright, jumping right into the first skill. 5 build for an okay amount of body. Breathe, endure, element. Elementalists may breathe and endure all elements at will. It's pretty sweet. Pretty dope. There are blocking skills, so if you have these, so you can't have a concentration in charm, a concentration in force, or a concentration in mana, which means that you specifically, essentially, you can't concentrate in a skill other than the elements. So you could particularly concentrate in a individual given element like fire, earth, ice, and lightning, but you couldn't, and you can concentrate in generic elements, so you do all the elements at -1 and everything else at +1. But if you pick your concentration as anything other than an elemental concentration, then you can't learn this skill. So there's a pseudo text here that says you have to be concentrated in an element or elements in general to be able to do this. So that's an important thing to know if you wanted to be an elementalist, is that you probably, which you're probably already doing if you're planning on being an elementalist anyway, so not too big of a deal. But yeah, breathing and enduring all elements at will is pretty hot. That's a pretty useful skill. Everybody would have this on their character sheet if they could, and only elementalists get this, so that's sweet. Uh, then we'll move on to the next skill, 10 wizardry for adaptation or elemental resistance. But this is an old skill that got reworked, and this used to be just called adaptation. But when struck by an elemental attack of any type, the elementalist may call out adaptation and pay 10 wizardry. And then for combat duration, that character is immune to that element from that opponent, which is pretty sweet. That's pretty good. Being able to just be like immune from a character, like if you're fighting elementals, and being able to be, or a thing that throws a specific element uh, of any type. So it's if it hits you for fire, if it throws specific fire at you, etc. You can adapt to it and become immune to it from that specific opponent. The elementalist must take damage from the original attack or use some other defense against it. So, when struck by an elemental attack of any type, it means that you can either just tank the, so if they throw like 25 fire at you, you can just tank the 25 fire, and but you could also call a valid defense for it and still be able to use adaptation, is what this is specifying. You can use this skill against multiple sources per combat, but never more than once against the same opponent. So if the opponent throws an element at you and you adaptation to it, then and then they change what element they're doing, you don't get to call adaptation to that particular person. If a different person throws, and you're only immune to the element from that person or from that monster. So it doesn't generically. So if you get, this is good against big creatures. So this, if you're fighting like a bunch of elementals, it might not be the best. Like if you're fighting, like 50 fire elementals and you're paying 10 wizardry for each of them to be immune to fire, that's kind of like not very much worth it. However, if you're fighting a big fire monster, this is amazing. And there are plenty of times when you just have to fight a big elemental that happens to be like a greater elemental or something, right? that is just like it's gonna sit around for it's a mini boss or it's a boss fight or something equivalent to that. This is a really good skill when that comes up. You really don't want to be using this at the cost of 10 wizardry. You really don't want to be using this for chaff or just for like the smaller things that you're gonna breeze through. Um, but yeah, very good skill, honestly. That's super good. Again, anybody would grab this skill if they could, but it's only an elementalist. Control elemental. This elementals come up, man. For 5 wizardry, you get to grab an NPC, and now it's your NPC. Control lasts 10 minutes, grants voice control over one elemental regardless of type. Functions similar to the sorcery spell in Slave. So you pay 10 wizardry and say control elemental and throw a packet at them. And if you hit them, then they're good. I imagine they can dodge this. I don't think that you should be able to just dodge this, which like fire elementals dodge things. I'm gonna be honest with you. Fire elementals can dodge typically. Just like how goblins can dodge, they do it kind of like as a race, but they're not elements. Elementals aren't particularly a race. They're a monster. It's pseudo. They can change it up. That's the cool thing about elementals is like, oh, this is a bigger elemental, so it swings for way more of that element, etc. Uh, So this is a good skill, honestly. There's a lot of times where people just default to elementals as the opponents that you're facing, or it's like go fix this. Like this fire is burning out of control. Go take care of this fire, and then there's a ton of fire elementals, so you gotta fight. Generic. And this is like really good, honestly, for 5 wizardry to make an NPC your buddy until that NPC dies. And it definitely comes down to like which NPC you're grabbing, honestly. Like if you have so it just comes down to the person playing that NPC, really. Like on how, in terms of like how amazing, like in terms of just blanketly, this is if you just assume that the NPC player is absolutely the worst, this is still 5 wizardry for I defeated this elemental, right? For the most part. Like I don't think that honestly the 10-minute control is going to be a whole long time. They're probably going to die before that. Uh, yeah, and elementals are kind of dumb, so they're not smart enough to really like go out of their way to avoid this. Most of the time they get role played that way, so like they're just simple like manifestations of an element. So yeah, this is a good skill. At the floor of this skill, it's 5 wizardry to get rid of a elemental, because quote unquote get rid of, because it won't. It's similar to Enslave, so you could just tell it to stand still, and then you could just killing blow it. Honestly, you could just be like stand still and then killing blow it. So this is 5 wizardry for get rid of an elemental, and it's also 5 wizardry with a higher ceiling of this could also be really good because you could have an extra ally that's attacking for you, which is cool. Uh, so then we move on. So that good skill, good skill. Elementalist Staff of Elements. Create a Staff of Elements. So there's a sorcery spell that is create Staff of Sorcery, and this is similar to it in a way, but you're paying 10 wizardry for this. And when we click on this button, you're gonna see why. This is super good, honestly. Elementalists may create a Staff of Elements, which is a sorcery construct weapon. Physrep must be plot approved and shows all 4 elements. So there is a specific elementalist staff in Monster Camp typically. It's like the same one that they like use for whenever they're showing an elementalist. And it has all 4. It has like it's really cool, crafted out of foam, and staffs are cool. But they're really tough to fight with because they're a two-handed weapon, but they have like both ends of it. Like you would think that like, oh yeah, I'm fighting with a staff, I gotta be like a ninja or like a monk or something, right? Like the most of the staff phys reps aren't like that, and it's tough to pass a phys rep for something else other than that as a staff. Uh, and just like this requires that you understand what a staff looks like to like in the game of Shiftedlands to understand how bad it is to actually fight with a staff. So this is going to sit on your back most of the time, okay? And there will be people who are like, I fight with staffs all the time. Like, sure. The average Joe, and like me included in this, fighting with a staff sucks. So just know that this is sitting on your back as a phys rep, and it's doing a bunch of awesome passive things, but you're not really going to be fighting with this, okay? Maybe summoned at any time for 10 wizardry. Sweet, that's actually pretty dope. That's not super expensive for the what you're getting here. Strikes for +1 of any element. I imagine this is at will. So if you need a swing, so if you really need a swing for an element, you can swing with your staff for that one. So this is, I mean, so far in the Elementalist, this is the first thing that's letting you actually swing for an element. So keep that in mind. Acts as a 1-to-1 focus for sorcery. So just which is essentially Staff of Sorcery is a literal staff that is you can just summon for like regular sorcery, and you get a just 1-to-1 focus sorcery into it, which is neat. And so this is like better Staff of Sorcery is essentially what we're seeing. We're seeing a Staff of Wizardry because it acts as a 1-to-1 focus for sorcery, and it also acts as a 1-to-1 focus for wizardry, which is sick, which is sweet. However, with the exception that it may be only used for other elementalist abilities, which is totally fine, okay? That's totally a good trade-off. If you just dump all your source or your wizardry into this at a 1-to-1, like doing things at 1-to-1 ratios is nuts. If you watch the Worm video and you saw the Staff of the Magi having a 1-to-1 focus for literally both upper pools of magic is nuts. 1-to-1 ratio of all the 4 magic pools was busted. So having a 1-to-1 focus for the thing that you care about because you're doing wizardry stuff is pretty good. And just exclusively using that only for, you're not really caring about this, to be honest. It's important to make note of, and it's important to understand that you're only allowed to use this wizardry for your elementalist stuff. But like that's what you're going to be doing most of the time anyway, is spending your wizardry into elementalist stuff. So it's not a big downside. Meta summoning as a sorcery for Staff of Elements effect, or to project packet, deliver raw, or yeah, and this also allows you to throw like how dragons get a throw, like base dragon gets to throw by paying 1 upper and 1 upper, 25 of their given element. You get to pay 1 wizardry for 25 of any element you want. Okay, this is a good ratio, honestly. Like, and you can have wizardry like candy, like 50 wizardry. Let's just do some math here. If you just sat in the back and threw 50 wizardry, you would be doing 1,250. Now, keep in mind that unlike Dragon, you don't get to uh stack them as far as my understanding, because Dragon specifically went out of its way to say, hey, in any combination, you can pay 1 and 1 to do this. So you could throw packets of 75. This is limiting you to 25 as far as I can tell. But that's still great. Like, that's honestly still really good. Just being like, elemental, like, to project packet deliver raw elements. So 25 fire, 25 fire, 25 fire, 25 fire, 25 fire, 25 fire. And that's like only 5 wizardry there. Like, that's pretty good. That, like, 25 fire a gazillion times at a ratio of 1 to 25 is pretty good. Like, this is, like, I imagine this is what you do the most of your time as an elementalist, is you sit in the back, like, just, like, one person behind, and you probably repel weapon on people, and then also throw the crap ton out of elements. Like, that's pretty sweet. Like, this by itself makes this path good. Being able to just throw elements like this is nuts. Unshatterable, and then it functions as like Staff of Sorcery, which is if it's dispelled or suppressed, all the stuff, the staff is gone, the magic sword is lost, you'd have to resummon it for 10. Duration is line of sight. It's possible to expend this during, so you can't like set this down and then walk away with it. So this has to be either in your hands or on your back or being carried on your person somehow. Which is like what line of sight means essentially. Like, you don't actually have to have it like in front of you in your sight. You can have this on your back. But yeah, this is the best skill so far that we've seen here, and it's literally this. I'm pretty sure this carries Elementalist. I'm pretty sure you play an Elementalist to do this. There's a couple of people that I've seen that played Elementalist, and the one that I think of the most is a plot marshal that runs around as an elementalist all the time, and I'm pretty sure he made Elementalist. So he must love it, or he must think it's the shit, because elementalists are pretty cool. I would play an Elementalist. This is sweet. This is if I was going down a wizardry path, I'd probably play Elementalist after I finished reading this. I was like, I'd play an Elementalist just to sit here and do this the whole time. Honestly, that's like really good. Like if you really want to be effective and you know you want to do wizardry, just play an Elementalist. This is sick. Yeah, good skill. Greater summoning. Uh, did we see regular summoning? Oh yeah, so the meta summoning allows you to summon an elemental as a meta magic. So technically anybody can summon like a lesser elemental, I'm pretty sure, with this skill. So this allows you to summon more elementals, more than one. But the problem is that you need NPCs slash buddies to do that, and trying to convince somebody like, hey, you want to just play as an elemental the whole game? Like that's kind of tough. Um, Honestly, and it's 10 build. If you couldn't pick up this skill, I think a lot of people wouldn't, to be honest. Like if you didn't have to pick up the skill to continue further down the path, you probably wouldn't pick up this skill, to be honest. And this again, this is my opinion. Um, but this skill only functions when summoning elementals using meta summoning. The elementals may choose to pay 50, like, and you're dumping like 50 or 100 wizardry into this to gain for the elementals to gain stuff. Like what? Additionally, elementals you can summon have memory of their previous lives, provided the same element is played by the same player. Every time he summons an ice elemental, it'll be Shivers with Shivers' memory of his previous lives. So this is a pseudo familiar thing, which is neat because you don't have to do the whole complicated stuff of having a familiar and like having it registered as a character in the system. So at any point in time, you can be like, hey, you want to be an ice elemental for this fight? And then like they can be like, yeah, and take off all their makeup and outfit and just be an ice elemental for your buddy to make your buddy feel cool. So this is neat. Um, I'm sure there's uses for it, but it's really kind of a flavor thing that yeah, elementalists get to summon elementals. Like it's cool. Getting like I couldn't imagine getting more than one, to be completely honest. Like, and you're paying like so much wizardry that like this is like we did the math earlier. This is like 100. This is like 1,250 fucking damage you could be doing theoretically if you have 100% accuracy with your packets. Um, that you're spending on getting like a dinky elemental that can probably die pretty quickly. Um, yeah, like it's okay. It's not the best skill, but it's very flavorful. And again, this is a lot of roleplay here. This is sweet because they keep their memories. So you could have like an elemental buddy running around, and like that by itself is what justifies the skill, is because like I get to have a buddy, and that's cool. It's fun to do things like if a plot marshal who was playing an elementalist came up to me and was like, "Hey, you want to play an ice elemental for like 2 hours?" I'd be like, "Hell yeah, I do!" Like that sounds fun. So yeah, like it's not as bad as I'm probably making it sound, but it's pretty okay. Elementalist may invoke an elemental state until next logistics. Once per week, so once per event, essentially. Elements may invoke an elemental state until next logistics. The only elements that may be invoked are the base elements. So there are technically other elements. We're not going to talk about that. Uh, but like just all you got to know is the base four elements, which is what most of this stuff is interacting with anyway. Um, Once invoked, player may place the appropriate colored wispy. We have a bunch of wispy like fabric, and it's like a pseudo fabric. Like you can see through it almost essentially. So we have a ton of wispy in Monster Camp. I'm sure they just let you borrow it, and you tie it around your arm. This ability may only be purchased once. So once a game, you get a suppressible aura that you pick. So again, so far in Elementalist, the only way to swing for elements is with your staff or this skill. Okay, you get a +0 suppressible aura. So you're definitely like picking like for this game I'm swinging fire or for this game I'm swinging ice. Healed by element is sick. I don't know if this is an individual use for healing, like they like 25 elements to me and then I heal off of it once, or if it's like I pop a healed by fire and now for combat duration I'm healed by fire, which is probably what it actually is. And if so, then this is really good. If it's a individual use, like I get to be healed by fire a total of 3 times ever, and it's not a per combat thing, then it's like okay. It's useful when you need to like really when you need to heal up your body, but you're a wizardry guy. So it's pretty neat. And yeah, that's the thing to be said actually, which is this is a pseudo way to heal yourself, and you're a wizardry person. You're not a spirit or an avatar person, so you don't typically have access to like cure wounds by yourself. Typically, obviously, a lot of people will like do a little bit of both, and they'll pick up cure wounds so they can do that for other people, etc. Imbue element. Elementalists may become attuned to an elemental plane of their choice. Spend 1 hour in a circle to attune to an elemental plane of their choosing. This is sweet. This is actually sick. Okay. You get to attune to an element, which essentially means that you're like quote unquote from there. Like you might as well live there when you're attuned to a plane, or specifically an elemental plane. And you'll quickly find out that the four planes of fire, lightning, earth, and ice are not the only elemental planes. I'm gonna be honest, there's a thing called ooze. There's like other planes. There's other things that are like pseudo elements, but they're not core elements. So like the fire plane is much bigger than the ooze plane. And if you play D&D, you know that there's like weird elements like ooze. That's like the first one that comes to mind is ooze. Um, but you can attune to an element. So if somebody wants to go to like a specific plane that happens to be an elemental plane, like having an elementalist around is sick because you attune to that plane, uh, binds the elementalist to the plane, preventing banishment from the attuned plane. Banishment is a thing that shunts you back to where you were to your attuned plane. Uh, Specifically, it's like banishment is good against elementals because you like they're fire elementals and you banish them and they go back to their home plane, which in this case is the fire plane. So a banishment is effectively a that NPC is gone like effect. It's a fight under against certain things. And allows the elementalist to act as an integral part of the plane for the purposes of magical travel. This is why this skill is good. So you attune to a plane, and then you count for the purposes of magical travel as part of that plane, which means that if you've learned about shifting or open rifts, I think we talked about it a bit with Elder Kesserin when we covered Kesserin. But there's ways to open portals to stuff, but the problem is that you need a integral part of the area that you're going. So if you want to go to a castle, if you have a rock from that castle ground, then you can and like that rock is from that castle, you can use that rock even if you're miles away to open a portal to that place because that rock was an integral part. It was a part of the place, right? In the same way, the elementalist is that rock, and the place instead of a castle, it's the elemental plane. So this is how you pseudo get to an elemental plane relatively easily, like relatively easily. Very like stress that relatively easily. Um, which is sick. So if you have an elementalist, they just spend, but they got to spend an hour to do it. So it's like, oh, we really need to go to the fire plane like right now, and it's like, oh shit, I'm attuned to the lightning plane. Give me an hour, you know. Um, and they got to spend this hour in the circle. Like you got to sit in a circle for an hour. Um, yeah. In addition, once attuned, the elementalists may choose to spend 10 wizardry to make other people do that. So this is like super convenient. Like if you need to go to a plane, effect lasts for 1 hour. That's hot. Uh, so if you need to go to like an elemental plane, which there are like spoiler alert, people definitely go to elemental planes for good reasons. I know personally that my brother has gone to the fire plane for a very good reason. Um, because sometimes the people that live on elemental planes are like important things or important people, and they're the only people that have like the power to solve an issue or sometimes shit like that, you know? Like Queen of the Fire Plane, King of the Ice Plane, etc. Like those are real NPCs that you can go like meet. Uh, uh this effect will last for and then being able when you're on an elemental plane you are very much needing to endure and breathe that element because like it's not like it's oxygen when you're on the fire plane it's all fire like there's not oxygen sitting around there so you have to be able to breathe and you're constantly being pelted with fire so you have to be able to breathe and endure and the elementalist is both the dude that's able to help you get the gate open to that plane very quickly relatively speaking, and then also allows everybody, if he wants to dump all the wizardry into it, he can let multiple people be on that plane for an hour, which is super relevant. It's like this is how you go on an adventure to an elemental plane, is be with an elementalist. Okay. Anyway, uh uh craft totem. So if you saw Chronomancer, they had a totem, and this functions basically almost exactly similarly, and then it's a wizardry ritual fetish with an upkeep of 0.4, may absorb. So I'm gonna go over it here again, and then I'm going to exclusively refer back to these because I'm pretty sure they're all copy paste, but they just have different elemental rituals. So I will talk about the rituals they get. So it's unshatterable, stores. It's a normal sorcery focus. Functions as a wizardry ritual fetish with an upkeep of 0.4. Fetishes make things cheaper. Like it's this kind of a concentration. It's a meta thing, and you got to pay an upkeep for it. And this specific fetish is making wizardry ritual cheaper. Okay. Uh, the elementalist must be the lead caster for these rituals if he wants to store them. May absorb rituals into the totem. Okay. Holds X rituals where X is the elementalist wizardry pool, 25% of the wizardry pool. And the rituals are Chain Lightning, Earth and Bulwark, Inferno, and Ice Fortress. So you get a lightning, earth, ice, fire. Okay. I personally have seen Ice Fortress and Inferno in game, and I can tell you that these are good rituals. So whereas Chronomancer had some unique rituals that kind of maybe cared about money, these are very much I'm throwing these things at bad people rituals. Okay, these are very much offensive rituals, which is cool. Being able to do offensive rituals is neat. Uh, and Ice Fortress is real good. So yeah, um, I would say that I would much rather have Elementalist rituals in my totem than I would have Chronomancy rituals in my totem. That's just me though. And it's a completely different playstyle. Like Elementalist is definitely trying to be fighting, and Chronomancer could, theoretically, they could just not fight at all, and they could just sit in town and play the economy game, right? Elementalist is very much doing a different thing, so it makes sense for them to have different rituals in their totem. If it's struck with a Dispel Magic or Suppress, you cannot access the rituals in the totem for 10 minutes, and you probably lose all your sorcery and crap. Any in-game effect that empties the focus will also destroy all the rituals stored within, right? Okay, so covered it. Uh, when I looked at the Chronomancer totem, my evaluation of it was pretty low, and honestly, looking back at it, like that's what Chronomancer wants to be doing. So like, it's cool. It's probably better than I made it sound. I would say I would rate Elementalist totem at like a lot better though. Like in terms of evaluating it for combat, Elementalist totem is far and above Chronomancy. But like you very much want to be throwing these rituals at people all the time. So being able to actually throw rituals that you want to throw is pretty sick. So yeah, good skill, good totem. And then the cookie, zero build. Elementalist supremacy. You may control a being with an elemental metabolism. This is more than a control elemental. You get to throw essentially in a slave that focuses on specifically an elemental, okay? You get to control elemental metabolisms. Things with there are more than elements that have elemental metabolisms. That's important to understand. So this hits more than elementals, which is scary for things that have elemental metabolisms, of which there are plenty. Um, this ability grants voice control. Uh, yeah. So like being able to, there are people walking around with elemental metabolisms. Like let's just put it that way. There are players walking around with elemental metabolisms. So being able to control based off of metabolism instead of the fact that it's an elemental is sick. This is like where elemental hits generic four elemental, like the four elements man, the amount of times I'm saying elemental in this video is insane. If there's four honest generic elementals, fire, earth, ice, and lightning. There are So there's like theoretically like 4 types of monsters you control. This is like shooting it up to like 25 types of things, right? Like there's like a lot more than just 4 elementals at this point that you're able to extend control over, which is sick. This is a really good cookie. Yeah, that was Elementalist. I have no idea how this was 30 minutes, but yeah, that was Elementalist. Pretty dope. They are able to conjure elements and command elemental servants, but are bound to respecting the limitations of each element as well. I couldn't tell you much about the roleplay because I've only briefly seen plot marshals playing Elementalist, uh, and they were doing fighting stuff, or they were like the PC, so they were out doing their own thing. Um, I have a distinct memory of one time I saw an Elementalist. That's essentially it. I personally I don't see a whole lot of Elementalists, and that's a shame because this is a really good effect. And this is very useful skills in terms of this is very useful for town to have one of these around. And then this is a really sweet totem. Like I would love to be able to throw these rituals. Like all 4 of these rituals are good rituals. So yeah, I would love to play an elementalist one day. These are cool. Yeah, that was elementalist. See ya in filtered. Filtered. See you in filtered.